Kettlewell said. Jan nodded. He had the look of a man who was steeling himself for a turn in an interrogation chamber. He barely said a word since Kettlewell arrived. For his part, Kettlewell appeared oblivious to all of this, though Suzanne was pretty sure that he understood exactly how uncomfortable this was making Jan. The thing is, 6 months ago, nearly everyone was convinced that I was a fucking moron, that I was about to piss away $10 billion of other people's money on a stupid doomed idea. Now they recopying me and poaching my best people. So this is good news for me, though I am going to have to find a new business manager for those two before they get picked up for turning planes into component pieces. Suzanne's PDA vibrated whenever the number of online news stories mentioning her or Codicell or Kettlewell increased or decreased sharply. She used to try to read everything, but it was impossible to keep up now. All she wanted was to keep track of whether the interestingness index was on the uptick or downtick. It had started to buzz that morning and the pitch had increased steadily until it was actually uncomfortable in her pocket. Irritated, she yanked it out and was about to switch it off when the lead article caught her eye. Kodacell loses Jan to Westinghouse. The byline was Freddy. Feeling like a character in a horror movie who can resist the compulsion to look under the bed. Suzanne thumbed the PDAS wheel and brought up the whole article. Codicell business manager Jan Lee Tang, whose adventures we've followed through Suzanne Church's gushing, besotted blog posts. She looked away and reflexively reached toward the delete button. The innuendo that she was romantically involved with one or more of the guys had circulated on her blog's message boards and around the dig dots ever since she started writing about them. No woman could possibly be writing about this stuff because it was important she had to be with the band. A groupie or a whore. Combine that with rat-toothed Freddy's sneering tone and she was instantly sent into heart-thundering rage. She deleted the post and looked out the window. Her pager buzzed some more and she looked down. The same article, being picked up on blogs, on some of the bigger dig dots, and an AP wire. She forced herself to reopen it, has been hired to head up a new business unit on behalf of the multinational giant Westinghouse. The appointment stands as more proof of Church's power to cloud men's minds with pretty empty words about the half-baked .com schemes that have oozed out of Silicon Valley and into every empty and dead American suburb. It was hypnotic, like staring into the eyes of a serpent. Her pulse actually thudded in her ears for a second before she took a few deep breaths and calmed down enough to finish the article, which was just more of the same. Nasty personal attacks. Sniping, and innuendo. Freddy even managed to imply that she was screwing all of them and Kettlewell besides. Kettlewell leaned over her shoulder and read. "You should send him an email," he said. "That's disgusting. That's not reportage, never get into a pissing match with a skunk." She said. "What Freddy wants is for me to send him mail that he can publish along with more snarky commentary. When the guy you re-arguing with controls the venue you re-arguing in, you can possibly win, so blog him." Kettlewell said. "Correct the record. The record is correct," she said. "It's never been incorrect. I've written an exhaustive record that is there for everyone to see. If people believe this, no amount of correction will help." Kettlewell made a face like a little boy who'd been told he could didn't have a toy. "That guy is poison," he said. "Those quote marks around blog, let him add his quote marks." She said. "My daily readership is higher than the Merc's paid circulation this week." It was true. After a short uphill climb from her new URL, she accumulated enough readers that the advertising revenue dwarfed her old salary at the Merc, an astonishing happenstance that nevertheless kept her bank account full. She clicked a little. "Besides, look at this. There are 36 links pointing at this story so far and all of them are critical of him. We don't need to stick up for ourselves, the world will," saying it calmed her, and now they were at the airport. They cruised into a private gate, away from the militarized gulag that fronted Miami International. A courteous security guard waved them through and the driver confidently piloted the car up to a wheeled jetway beside a cute, stubby little toy jet. On the side, in cursive script, was the plane's name. Suzanne. She looked accusatorially at Kettlewell. "It was called that when I bought the company," he said, expressionless but somehow mirthful behind his curved surfer shades. "But I kept it because I liked the private joke. Just no one tell Freddie that you've got an airplane with my name on it or we'll never hear the fucking end of it." She covered her mouth, regretting her language, and Kettlewell laughed, and so did Jan, and somehow the ice was broken between them. "No way flying this thing is cost-effective," Jan said. "Your CFO should be kicking your ass, it's a little indulgence." Kettlewell said, bounding up the steps and shaking hands with a small, neat woman pilot, an African-American with cornrows peeking out under her smart peaked cap. "Once you've flown in your own bird, you never go back, this is a monstrosity." Jan said as he boarded. "What this thing eats up in hangar fees alone would be enough to bankroll 3 or 4 teams." He settled into an oversized bark lounger of a seat and accepted a glass of orange juice that the pilot poured for him. "Thank you, and no offense, none taken," she said. "I agree 100%. "See," Jan said. Suzanne took her own seat and her own glass and buckled in and watched the two of them, warming up for the main event, realizing that she'd been brought along as a kind of opening act. "They paying you more, yup," Jan said. "All on the back end. Half a point on every dollar brought in by a team I coach or whose members I mentor." Kettlewell whistled. "That's a big share," he said. "If I can make my numbers. I'll take home $1 million this year, you'll make those numbers. Good negotiations. Why didn't you ask us for the same deal, would you have given it to me? You a star," Kettlewell said, nodding at Suzanne, whose invisibility to the conversation popped like a bubble. "Thanks to her, thanks. Suzanne," Jan said. Suzanne blushed. "Come on, guys." Jan shook his head. She doesn't really understand. "It's actually kind of charming, we might have matched the offer, you guys are first to market. You've got a lot of procedures in place. I wanted to reinvent some wheels, we too conservative for you." Jan grinned wickedly. "Oh yes," he said. "I am going to do business in Russia." Kettlewell grunted and pounded his orange juice. Around them, the jet's windows flashed white as they broke through the clouds and the 10,000-foot bell sounded. "How the hell are you going to make anything that doesn't collapse under its own weight in Russia? The corruption's a problem." "Sure," Jan said. "But it's offset by the entrepreneurship. Some of those cats make the Chinese look lazy and unimaginative. It's a shame that so much of their efforts have been centered on graft, but there's no reason they couldn't be focused on making an honest ruble." They fell into a discussion of the minutiae of Perry and Lester's businesses, franker than any business discussion she'd ever heard. Jan talked about the places where they screwed up, and places where they scored big, and about all the plans he'd made for Westinghouse, the connections he had in Russia. He even talked about his kids and his ex in St. Petersburg, and Kettlewell admitted that he'd known about them already. For Kettlewell's part, he opened the proverbial kimono wide, telling Jan about conflicts within the board of directors, poisonous holdovers from the pre-Codicil days who sabotaged the company from within with petty bureaucracy, even the problems he was having with his family over the long hours they were working. He opened the minibar and cracked a bottle of champagne to toast Jan's new job, and they mixed it with more orange juice, and then there were bagels and schmear, fresh fruit, power bars, and canned Starbucks coffees with deadly amounts of sugar and caffeine. When Kettlewell disappeared into the tiny but marble-appointed bathroom, Suzanne found herself sitting alone with Jan, almost knee to knee, lightheaded from lack of sleep and champagne and altitude. "Some trip," she said. "You the best," he said, wobbling a little. "You know that. Just the best. The stuff you write about these guys, it makes me want to stand up and salute. You make us all seem so fucking glorious. We're going to end up taking over the world because you inspire us so. Maybe I shouldn't tell you this, because you're not very self-conscious about it right now, but Suzanne, you won't believe it because you're so goddamned modest. 2. It's what makes your writing so right, so believable." Kettlewell stepped out of the bathroom. "Touching down soon," he said, and patted them each on the shoulder as he took his seat. "So that's about it. Then," he said, and leaned back and closed his eyes. Suzanne was accustomed to thinking of him as 20-something, the boyish age of the magazine cover portraits from the start of his career. Now, eyes closed on his private jet, harsh upper atmosphere sun painting his face, his crow's feet and the deep vertical brackets around his mouth revealed him for someone pushing a youthful 40. Kept young by exercise and fun and the animation of his ideas. Guess so, Jan said, slumping. This has been one of the more memorable experiences of my life. Kettlewell. Suzanne. Not entirely pleasant, but pleasant on the whole. A magical time in the clouds. Once you've flown private, you'll never go back to coach. Kettlewell said, smiling, eyes still closed. You still think my CFO should spank me for not selling this thing? No, Jan said. In 10 years, if we do our jobs. There won't be 5 companies on earth that can afford this kind of thing. It'll be like building a cathedral after the Protestant Reformation. While we have the chance, we should keep these things in the sky. But you should give one to Lester and Perry to take apart. I was planning to. Kettlewell said. Thanks. Suzanne and Kettlewell got off the plane and Jan didn't look back when they landed at JFK. Should we go into town and get some bialy to bring back to Miami? Kettlewell said, squinting at the bright day on the tarmac. Bring deli to Miami, right. He said. Forget I asked. Besides, we have to charter a chopper to get into Manhattan and back without dying in traffic. Something about the light through the open hatch or the sound or the smell, something indefinably New York, made her yearn for Miami. The great cities of commerce like New York and San Francisco seemed too real for her, while the suburbs of Florida were a kind of endless summer camp, a dreamtime where anything was possible. Let us go, she said. The champagne buzz had crashed and she had a touch of headache. I am bushed, me too. Kettlewell said. I left San Jose last night to get into Miami before Jan left. Not much sleep. Gonna put my seat back and catch some winks, if that's okay. Good plan. Suzanne said. Embarrassingly, when they were fully reclined, their seats nearly touched, forming something like a double bed. Suzanne lay awake in the hum of the jets for a while, conscious of the breathing human beside her, the first man she'd done anything like share a bed with in at least a year. The last thing she remembered was the 10,000-foot bell going off, and then she slipped away into sleep. Perry thought that they'd sell 1 million homewares in 6 months. Lester thought he was nuts, that number was too high, please. He said, I invented these things, but there aren't a million roommate households in all of America. We'll sell 500,000 tops. Total. Lester always complained when she quoted him directly in her blog posts, but she thought he secretly enjoyed it. Today the boys shipped their 1,000th unit. It took 6 weeks. They uncorked a bottle of champagne when Unit 1 million shipped. They hadn't actually shipped it, per se. The manufacturing was spread out across 40 different teams all across the country, even a couple of Canadian teams. The RFID printer company had rehired half the workers they'd laid off the year before, and had them all working overtime to meet demand. What's exciting about this isn't just the money that these guys have made off of it, or the money that Codicel will return to its shareholders, it's the ecosystem that these things have enabled. There are at least 10 competing commercial systems for organizing, tagging, sharing, and describing home-aware objects. Parents love them for their kids. School teachers love them. Seniors' homes. The seniors' homes had been Francis's idea. They brought him in to oversee some of the production engineering, along with some of the young braves who ran around the squatter camps. Francis knew which ones were biddable and he kept them to heel. In the evenings, he'd join the guys and Suzanne up on the roof of the workshop on folding chairs, with beers, watching the sweaty sunset. They were not the sole supplier. That's what an ecosystem is all about, creating value for a lot of players. All this competition is great news for you and me, because it's already driven the price of home-aware goods down by 40%. That means that Lester and Perry are going to have to invent something new soon, before the margin disappears altogether, and that's also good news for you and me. Are you coming? Lester had dated a girl for a while, someone he met on Craigslist, but she dumped him, and Perry had confided that she left him because he didn't live up to the press he'd gotten in Suzanne's column. When he got dumped, he became even touchier about Suzanne, caught at a distance from her that was defined by equal parts of desire and resentment. Up in a minute, she said, trying to keep her smile light and noncommittal. Lester was very nice, but there were times when she caught him staring at her like a kicked puppy and it made her uncomfortable. Naturally, this increased his discomfort as well. On the roof they already had a cooler of beers going and beside it a huge plastic tub of brightly colored machine parts, jet engine. Perry said. The months had put a couple pounds on him and new wrinkles, and given him some gray at the temples, and laugh lines inside his laugh lines. Perry was always laughing at everything around them. They fucking pay me to do this. He told her once, before literally collapsing to the floor, rolling with uncontrollable hysteria. He laughed again. Good old kettlebelly, she said. Must have broken his heart. Francis held up a curved piece of cowling. This thing wasn't going to last anyway. See the distortion here and here. This thing was designed in a virtual wind tunnel and machine lathed. We tried that a couple times, but the wind tunnel sims were never detailed enough and the forms that flew well in the machine always died a premature death in the sky. Another 2 years and he'd have had to have it rebuilt anyway, and the Koreans who built this charged shitloads for parts, too bad. Lester said. It's pretty. Gorgeous, even. He mimed its curve in the air with a pudgy hand, that elegant swoop. Aerospace loves the virtual wind tunnel. Francis said, and glared at the cowling. You can use evolutionary algorithms in the sim and come up with really efficient designs, in theory. And computers are cheaper than engineers, is that why you were laid off? Suzanne said. I wasn't laid off. Girl. He said. He jiggled his lame foot. I retired at 65 and was all set up but the pension plan went bust. So I missed a month of medical and they cut me off and I ended up uninsured. When the wife took sick. Bam, that was it, wiped right out. But I am not bitter. Why should the poor be allowed to live? Huh. His acolytes, 3 teenagers in do-rags from the shantytown, laughed and went on to pitching bottle caps off the edge of the roof. Stop that. Now. He said. You getting the junkyard all dirty. Christ, you think that they grew up in some kind of zoo. When Francis drank, he got a little mean, a little dark. So, kids. Perry said, wandering over to them, hands in pockets. Silhouetted against the setting sun, biceps bulging, muscular chest tapering to his narrow hips, he looked like a Greek statue. What do you think of the stuff we rebuilding? They looked at their toes. Okay, one of them grunted. Answer the man. Francis snapped. Complete sentences, looking up and at him, like you've got a shred of self-respect. Christ, what are you, 5 years old? They shifted uncomfortably. It's fine. One of them said. Would you use it at home? One of them snorted. No man. My dad steals anything nice we get and sells it. Oh, Perry said. Fucker broke in the other night and I caught him with my iPod. Nearly took his fucking head off with my Canon before I saw who it was. Fucking juice head, you should have fucked him up. One of the other kids said. My ma pushed my pops in front of a bus one day to get rid of him, guy broke both his legs and never came back. Suzanne knew it was meant to shock them, but that didn't take away from its shockingness. In the warm fog of riding and living in Florida, it was easy to forget that these people lived in a squatter camp and were technically criminals, and received no protection from the law. Perry, though, just squinted into the sun and nodded. Have you ever tried burglar alarms? The kids laughed derisively and Suzanne winced, but Perry was undaunted. You could be sure that you woke up whenever anyone entered, set up a light and siren to scare them off. I want one that fires spears. The one with the juicehead father said. Blowtorches, said the one whose mother pushed his father under a bus. I want a force field. The third one said, speaking for the first time. I want something that will keep anyone from coming in. Period. So I don't have to sleep one eye up. 'Cause I'll be safe. The other two nodded. Slowly. Damn straight. Francis said. That was the last time Francis's acolytes joined them on the rooftop. Instead, when they finished work they went home, walking slowly and talking in low murmurs. With just the grown-ups on the roof, it was a lot more subdued. What's that smoke? Lester said, pointing at the black billowing column off to the west, in the sunset's glare. House fire, Francis said. Has to be. Or a big fucking car wreck, maybe. Perry ran down the stairs and came back up with a pair of high-power binocs. Francis, that's your place. He said after a second's fiddling. He handed the binocs to Francis. Just hit the button and they'll self-stabilize, that's my place. Francis said. Oh, Christ. He'd gone gray and seemed to have sobered up instantly. His lips were wet, his eyes bright. They drove over at speed. Suzanne wedged into Lester's Frankensmart car, practically under his armpit, and Perry traveling with Francis. Lester still wore the same cologne as her father, and when she opened the window, its smell was replaced by the burning tires smell of the fire. They arrived to discover a fire truck parked on the side of the freeway nearest the shantytown. The firefighters were standing soberly beside it, watching the fire rage across the canal. They rushed for the footbridge and a firefighter blocked their way. "Sorry, it's not safe," he said. He was Latino, good-looking, like a movie star, bronze skin flickering with copper highlights from the fire. "I live there," Francis said. "That's my home." The firefighter looked away. "It's not safe," he said. "Why aren't you fighting the fire?" Suzanne said. Francis's head snapped around. "You not fighting the fire? You going to let our houses burn?" A couple more firefighters trickled over. Across the river, the fire had consumed half of the little settlement. Some of the residents were operating a slow and ponderous bucket brigade from the canal, while others ran into the unburned buildings and emerged clutching armloads of belongings, bits of furniture, boxes of photos. "Sir," the movie star said. "The owner of this property has asked us not to intervene. Since there's no imminent risk to life and no risk of the burn spreading off his property, we can trespass to put out the fire." "Our hands are tied," the owner. Francis spat. "This land is in title dispute. The court case has been underway for 20 years now." "What owner?" The movie star shrugged. "That's all I know. Sir, across the canal, the fire was spreading, and the bucket brigade was falling back." Suzanne could feel the heat now, like putting your face in the steam from a boiling kettle. Francis seethed, looking from the firemen and their truck back to the fire. He looked like he was going to pop something, or start shouting, or charge into the flames. Suzanne grabbed his hand and walked him over to the truck and grabbed the first firefighter she encountered. "I am Suzanne Church, from the San Jose Mercury News, a McClatchy paper. I'd like to speak to the commanding officer on the scene." "Please." She hadn't been with the Merc for months, but she hadn't been able to bring herself to say, "I am Suzanne Church with SuzanneChurch.org." She was pretty sure that no matter how high her readership was and how profitable her ad sales were, the firefighter wouldn't have been galvanized into the action that was invoked when she mentioned the name of a real newspaper. He hopped to, quickly moving to an older man. Tapping him on the shoulder, whispering in his ear. Suzanne squeezed Francis's hand as the fire chief approached them. She extended her hand and talked fast. "Suzanne Church," she said, and took out her notebook, the key prop in any set piece involving a reporter. "I am told that you are going to let those homes burn because someone representing himself as the title holder to that property has denied you entry. However, I am also told that the title to that land is in dispute and has been in the courts for decades. Can you resolve this for me?" Chief Brian Wanamaker," he said. He was her age, with the leathery skin of a Florida native who spent a lot of time out of doors. "I am afraid I have no comment for you at this time." Suzanne kept her face deadpan, and gave Francis's hand a warning squeeze to keep him quiet. He was trembling now. "I see. You can comment, you can fight the fire. Is that what you'd like me to write in tomorrow's paper?" The chief looked at the fire for a moment. Across the canal, the bucket brigaders were losing worse than ever. He frowned and Suzanne saw that his hands were clenched into fists. "Let me make a call." "Okay." Without waiting for an answer, he turned on his heel and stepped behind the fire engine, reaching for his cell phone. Suzanne strained to hear his conversation, but it was inaudible over the crackle of the fire. When she turned around again, Francis was gone. She caught sight of him again in just a moment, running for the canal, then jumping in and landing badly in the shallow, swampy water. He hobbled across to the opposite bank and began to laboriously climb it. A second later, Perry followed. Then Lester. "Chief," she said, going around the engine and pointing. The chief had the phone clamped to his head still, but when he saw what was going on, he snapped it shut, dropped it in his pocket and started barking orders. Now the firefighters moved, boiling across the bridge, uncoiling hoses, strapping on tanks and masks. They worked in easy, fluid concert, and it was only seconds before the water and foam hit the flames and the smoke changed to white steam. The shantytown residents cheered. The fire slowly receded. Perry and Lester had Francis, holding him back from charging into the fray as the firefighters executed their clockwork dance. The steam was hot enough to scald, and Suzanne pulled the collar of her blouse up over her face. Around her were the shantytowners, mothers with small children, old men, and a seemingly endless parade of thug-life teenagers. The boys in miniature cycling shorts and do-rags, the girls in bandeau tops, glitter makeup, and skirts made from overlapping strips of rag, like post-apocalyptic hula outfits. Their faces were tight, angry, smudged with smoke and pinkened by the heat. She saw the one whose father had reportedly been pushed under a bus by his mother, and he grimaced at her. "What we gonna do now, I don't know," she said. "Are you all right? Is your family all right?" Don T got nowhere to sleep, nowhere to go. He said. Don T even have a change of clothes. My mom's one T stop crying. There were tears in his eyes. He was all of 15, she realized. He D seemed much older on the roof. She gathered him into her arms and gave him a hug. He was stiff and awkward at first and then he kind of melted into her, weeping on her shoulder. She stroked his back and murmured reassuringly. Some of the other shantytowners looked at the spectacle. Then looked away. Even a couple of his homeboys whom she'd have bet would have laughed and pointed at this show of weakness only looked and then passed on. One had tears streaking the smoke smudges on his face. For someone who isn't good at comforting people. I seem to be doing a lot of it. She thought. Francis and Lester and Perry found her and Francis gave the boy a gruff hug and told him everything would be fine. The fire was out now, the firefighter hosing down the last embers, going through the crowd and checking for injuries. A TV news crew had set up and a pretty black reporter in her 20s was doing a stand-up. The illegal squatter community has long been identified as a problem area for gang and drug activity by the Broward County Sheriff's Office. The destruction here seems total, but it's impossible to say whether this spells the end of this encampment, or whether the denizens will rebuild and stay on. Suzanne burned with shame. That could have been her. When she'd first seen this place, it had been like something out of a documentary on Ethiopia. As she'd come to know it, it had grown homier. The residents built piecemeal, one wall at a time, one window, one poured concrete floor, as they could afford it. None of them had mortgages, but they had neat vegetable gardens and walkways spelled out in white stones with garden gnomes standing guard. The reporter was staring at her and naturally so, she'd been staring at the reporter. Glaring at her. My RV, Francis said. Pointing. Distracting her. It was a charred wreck. He went to the melted doors and opened them, stepping back as a puff of smoke rose from the inside. A firefighter spotted it and diverted a stream of water into the interior, soaking Francis and whatever hadn't burned. He turned and shouted something at the firefighter, but he was already hosing down something else. Inside Francis's trailer, they salvaged a drenched photo album, a few tools, and a lockbox with some of his papers in it. He had backed up his laptop to his watch that morning, so his data was safe. I kept meaning to scan these in. He said, paging through the photos in the soaked album. Should have done it. Night was falling, the mosquitoes singing and buzzing. The neat little laneways and homey, patchwork buildings lay in ruins around them. The shantytowners clustered in little groups or picked through the ruins. Drivers of passing cars slowed down to rubberneck, and a few shouted filthy, vengeful things at them. Suzanne took pictures of their license plates. She depublished them when she got home. A light drizzle fell. Children cried. The swampy sounds of cicadas and frogs and mosquitoes filled the growing dark and then the streetlights flicked on all down the river of highway, painting everything in blue-white mercury glow. We've got to get tents up. Francis said. He grabbed a couple of young men and gave them orders, things to look for fresh water, plastic sheeting, anything with which to erect shelters. Lester started to help them, and Perry stood with his hands on his hips, next to Suzanne. Jesus Christ. He said. This is a fucking disaster. I mean, these people are used to living rough, but this he broke off, waving his hands helplessly. He wiped his palms off on his butt, then grabbed Francis. Get them going, he said. Get them to gather up their stuff and walk them down to our place. We've got space for everyone for now at least. Francis looked like he was going to say something, then he stopped. He climbed precariously up on the hood of Lester's car and shouted for people to gather round. The boys he bossed around took up the call, and it wasn't long before nearly everyone was gathered around them. "Can everyone hear? This is as loud as I go." There were murmurs of assent. Suzanne had seen him meet with his people before in the daylight and the good times, seen the respect they afforded to him. He wasn't the leader, per se, but when he spoke, people listened.